What if the reason your manifestations aren't working isn't because you're doing it wrong, but because you're doing too much? What if the truth about quantum manifestation is so ridiculously simple that your mind keeps skipping right past it in search of something more dramatic, more complex, more convincing? We live in a world obsessed with effort, with formulas, morning routines, rituals, and endless steps. We've been taught that if you're not grinding, you're falling behind, that if something isn't working, you just need to try harder, push more, hustle longer. But in the quantum world, this entire mindset collapses because effort doesn't move energy, coherence does, and coherence is quiet, subtle, effortless, which is exactly why almost no one sees it. We've been conditioned to believe that success is a reward for suffering, that if something is simple, it must be a scam, that ease is a trap and struggle is noble. But quantum manifestation doesn't play by these rules. The quantum field is not watching your effort, it's tuning in to your frequency. And that frequency is not determined by how many goals you write down or how many hours you spend visualizing. It's determined by what you are, not what you want, not what you hope for, not what you're trying to attract. The quantum field is like a mirror with no opinions, no preferences, no emotions. It simply reflects back whatever energy you broadcast most consistently. That means if you're stuck in the loop of constantly doing to get what you want, you're missing the entire point. The doing is not the key, the being is, and the being is simple. But here's the problem. Simplicity terrifies the ego, because the ego survives by complexity. It wants steps, it wants plans, it wants effort it can point to and say, look, I'm doing something. I'm making it happen. Simplicity threatens that identity. It asks you to drop the struggle, to stop reaching, to stop proving, and instead to trust, to embody, to shift your internal state without any guarantee from the outside world. And that's the scariest thing of all, because it requires surrendering control. It requires faith in an unseen law that operates beneath the surface of physical action, and it requires the kind of stillness that most people will do anything to avoid. But that stillness is the doorway. That alignment is the access point. And that is why quantum manifestation, though simple, remains invisible to those addicted to the noise. The field does not speak in words. It doesn't measure how badly you want something. It doesn't judge your past or your potential. It listens only to frequency, your emotional and energetic signature in this moment. And the most magnetic signature isn't the one filled with desire, it's the one filled with knowing, not hope, not wishing, but a calm, embodied certainty. That's the paradox. You stop chasing when you realize you already are. You stop manifesting when you finally collapse into the truth that there's nothing to get, only something to remember. That's why the people who create radical shifts in their lives often seem like they're doing very little. From the outside, it looks passive, but internally, their entire signal is different, and reality, without resistance, begins to move around them. Here's the real question. Can you trust something so simple it doesn't need your effort to work? Can you believe that the act of chasing is actually what's holding it away? Because once you do, something strange starts to happen. You feel less urgency. You stop forcing outcomes. You start noticing subtle shifts, people, opportunities, ideas, all showing up without strain. And that's when you realize this isn't magic. This isn't coincidence. This is physics. And you've been broadcasting your future the entire time. You just didn't know how loudly your doubt was speaking. Now here's the shift. If the field doesn't move by effort, what does it respond to? The answer is frequency. And frequency is not something you try to have. It's something you generate through internal alignment, through becoming a match to the life you want without needing anything to change first. This is the opposite of how we've been trained. You're told to wait for the evidence and then feel the feeling. But in the quantum world, it's reversed. You feel the feeling and the evidence follows. This is where true manifestation begins, not in the hustle, not in the grind, not in doing more, but in attuning to a state where less does more. The quantum field is listening, but not to your words, not to your effort, only to your being. So the question is, what frequency are you actually broadcasting? Because that's what's creating your life, not your effort, not your affirmations, your signal. And the more you simplify, the stronger that signal becomes. The quieter the ego gets, the clearer your field becomes. And when coherence takes the place of chaos, manifestation doesn't just get easier, it becomes inevitable. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And that simple truth dismantles most of what you've been taught about manifestation. Wanting something doesn't bring it closer. In fact, the vibration of wanting often does the opposite. It amplifies the distance. Because in the quantum world, wanting is a frequency of lack. It says, I don't have it yet. It says, it's separate from me. And that separation becomes your signal. The more you want, the more you reinforce the fact that you don't yet embody it. The quantum field, being neutral and immediate, doesn't interpret your wishes or your intentions. It mirrors your state. So if you feel incomplete without your desire, you're broadcasting incompletion, and the field will keep reflecting back experiences that match that vibration, more delay, more distance, more lack. This is why chasing dreams often keeps them out of reach. Because chasing is rooted in the assumption that what you want is outside of you. And every action you take from that place, no matter how spiritual or productive it seems, continues to affirm that gap. You are not pulling the dream closer. You're running on a treadmill of energetic contradiction. You're asking for a reality you have not yet emotionally tuned into. And that's where most people stay stuck. They believe they need to get something before they can feel something. But the truth is, the feeling comes first. That's how you collapse distance in the field, not by effort, but by identity. By becoming the version of you who already lives the life you've been asking for, not pretending, not performing, becoming, quietly, internally, deeply. And here's what happens when you do that. Your energy stops seeking. You begin to radiate instead of request. You walk into rooms differently. You think different thoughts without forcing them. You say no to things that no longer fit, not because you're trying to act like a new person, but because you are one. The field responds to that shift immediately. You might not see the results overnight, but something starts rearranging beneath the surface. Circumstances begin to adjust, people exit or enter, paths open. Because you're no longer tuned to the version of reality where you're lacking. You're now aligned with the version of you who already has. And coherence once again becomes your greatest power. Not effort, not time, alignment. This is the essence of quantum manifestation. It's not a process of accumulation, it's a process of remembering. The version of you who is already free, fulfilled, abundant, in love, at peace. That version is not an idea, it's a real frequency, a real identity, existing right now in the infinite field of possibility. And your job is not to create them from scratch. Your job is to meet them, to become such an emotional match to that version that the field has no choice but to shift. Reality follows resonance. And the moment you stop chasing, the timeline you've been looking for stops running, because you finally collapse the difference between who you are and who you were always meant to be. But here's where people get it twisted. They think becoming that version of themselves means faking it, acting as if, posing, pretending. But the field isn't fooled by performance. It listens for truth. That means you can't skip the inner work. You can't fake the frequency. You have to feel the shift, not just think it. You have to let it settle into your nervous system, into your breath, into your smallest choices. You have to build a new default state, one moment at a time, until the life you once craved feels less like a dream and more like a memory, like something you're remembering instead of reaching for. Because in quantum reality, you don't pull the future in. You step into the version of you where it already exists. So stop asking for a new life to show up. Start asking who you'd have to be for that life to feel normal. And when that becomes your baseline, your world will shift in ways no effort ever could. The mistake most people make is asking the universe to deliver what they haven't yet decided they are. They wait for signs. They hope for breakthroughs. They visualize and affirm and journal. But underneath all that effort is an energetic signal that still says, I don't believe it yet. And the field listens to that. It doesn't respond to words. It responds to coherence. And coherence means your thoughts, emotions, and actions are not in conflict. They're harmonized, integrated, aligned. That's when the field reflects what you want, because you're no longer broadcasting desire, you're radiating arrival. Now ask yourself, how would you live if you knew your manifestation was already guaranteed? How would you feel if you knew it had already unfolded on another timeline and all you had to do was sync with it? That's not fantasy, that's quantum. And the moment you stop waiting for evidence and start living from that inner conviction, reality stops delaying, because your energy is no longer asking, it's declaring, and the field always answers declarations faster than requests. Here's what no one tells you. Manifestation doesn't require belief in the traditional sense, it requires familiarity. Your brain doesn't need to be convinced, it just needs to get used to the new frequency. And the fastest way to do that isn't to fight your old thoughts, it's to rehearse your new state, mentally, emotionally, every day, until it becomes more familiar than the lack you're trying to escape. Until your nervous system can't tell the difference between the future and now. That's when your desire stops being a fantasy and starts becoming a fact. Not because the field gave it to you, but because you became it. And now we land on a truth so radical, most people overlook it completely. You don't need to ask the universe for anything. You need to remember that you're already in conversation with it. Every moment, every emotion, every thought. You've been broadcasting your signature this whole time. The question is, are you ready to finally tune that signal to the version of you that doesn't need to ask anymore? Because the field responds instantly, not when you hope, not when you wish, but the very moment you remember who you are. You can't fake energy. You can say the right words, you can do the rituals, you can sit in perfect meditation posture every morning for 30 minutes. But if your body is vibrating with doubt, fear, or unworthiness, the field hears that, not your words. This is what most people miss. The universe doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to who you are when no one's looking. And most importantly, to who you are energetically, not intellectually, not performatively, not spiritually in theory, but vibrationally at your core. That's the real signal. That's the frequency that speaks to the quantum field. You might be saying, I am abundant 100 times a day, but if your nervous system is tight, if your breath is shallow, if you're checking your bank account in panic, then the universe isn't receiving abundance. It's receiving scarcity. It's receiving tension. It's receiving the emotional imprint of someone who doesn't yet feel safe, someone who doesn't yet feel worthy, someone who's trying to override fear with surface-level optimism. And the field is brutally honest. It won't deliver to who you pretend to be. It will mirror exactly who you are being. That's the beauty and the challenge of coherence, because it means nothing is hidden. The vibration you carry in your quietest moments is what gets reflected back in your loudest desires. That's why affirmations don't work when they're used like band-aids, because you're trying to patch over a fractured frequency instead of actually aligning it. You're speaking abundance while carrying the energy of contraction. You're visualizing love while subconsciously expecting abandonment. You're lighting candles for clarity while clinging to chaos. And the quantum field is not moved by the words or the rituals. It's moved by the emotion underneath, by the energetic coherence between your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. When those three align, when your mental signal, your emotional state, and your behavioral choices are all playing the same frequency, something shifts. The universe stops hesitating. Opportunities become fluid. Synchronicities start stacking, not because you tried harder, but because you matched the frequency of the outcome. Coherence isn't perfection. It doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means you notice it and return again and again. It's a practice, a muscle, an energetic posture that gets stronger the more you choose it. And choosing it means refusing to act from contradiction. It means no longer saying one thing and vibrating another. It means walking your life into harmony, step by step, thought by thought, breath by breath, until your energy is clean, congruent, unmistakable, until your presence becomes the affirmation. Not because you're forcing it, but because it's become your default state. And this is why coherence is the secret code. Not because it's complicated, but because it's honest. The field doesn't need a perfect you, it needs a true you. A you that no longer sends mixed signals. A you that isn't trying to outsmart the universe with tricks and techniques. A you that simply knows, what I feel is what I broadcast, and what I broadcast is what returns. So if I want a different reflection, I don't chase the mirror, I change the signal. That's the key. Now here's where it gets even deeper. The quantum field doesn't speak English. It doesn't understand your goals, your journals, your declarations of worth. It responds to emotion. Emotion is the language of manifestation. It's how the subconscious speaks to the field. Thought sets the direction, but feeling is the fuel. You can think about freedom all day, but if your emotional tone is fear, the message gets scrambled, the signal gets distorted, and the outcome delayed, rerouted, or denied, not out of punishment, but out of perfect resonance. This is why it's so important to feel first, to create the emotion before the evidence, to become the version of you who already knows. Not someday, not eventually, but now. The feeling is the frequency. And if you can generate that emotion without needing the external proof first, you've already begun collapsing time. Because the field doesn't care when you feel it. It just cares that you feel it. And when you do, it mirrors that frequency in ways your logical mind could never plan. Think of it this way. You are a broadcasting tower. Your every thought and emotion sends out a signal, and that signal gets picked up by the quantum field. If your thoughts say, "I'm ready," but your emotions whisper, "I'm scared," then the field gets a jumbled frequency. It doesn't reject you, it simply waits. It holds your manifestation in potential, like a song that hasn't found the right channel to play through yet. But the moment your thoughts, emotions, and actions harmonize into one clear frequency, that's when the song starts to play. That's when the potential becomes a pattern. That's when the outcome begins to materialize, not through effort, but through energetic precision. So stop thinking the universe needs convincing. It doesn't need you to prove yourself. It doesn't need constant reminders. It needs emotional coherence. That's the most advanced technique of all, and yet, it's also the most natural. Because when you feel the emotion of your desired reality, as if it's already real, the field treats it like it already is. Gratitude opens doors, trust clears static, joy recalibrates timelines, peace becomes magnetic, and love is the purest signal of all. Not desperate love, not conditional love, but the kind of love that says, "I already am." That kind of love makes the field respond like lightning. So if you've been waiting for your life to change, ask yourself, have I changed my emotional baseline? Am I broadcasting the energy of someone who knows it's done? Or am I still sending out static, confusion, contradiction? Because the field never makes mistakes. It only mirrors. It only responds to the truth beneath the performance. And when that truth becomes alignment, when you stop trying and start tuning, that's when manifestation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Wanting something deeply doesn't guarantee you'll receive it. In fact, the stronger the wanting, the more you often push it away. Because wanting is rooted in absence. It declares energetically, "I don't have this yet." And the quantum field, being non-judgmental and precise, reflects that back to you without hesitation. You think you're manifesting your desires, but if you're doing it from a place of yearning, craving, or desperation, what you're actually energizing is the space between you and the outcome. The more you chase it, the more you affirm it's missing. That's the silent contradiction most people never recognize. They say they're focused on abundance, but their internal state is drenched in fear. They say they're calling in love, but their daily emotions echo loneliness. The signal is mixed, and the result is delay. When you're chasing something, what you're really doing is worshipping the lack of it. You're saying to the universe, "This thing defines my wholeness, and without it, I am incomplete." And what does the quantum field do with that? It responds in kind. It delivers you more experiences that reflect that same belief, that you are not yet whole, not yet ready, not yet aligned. That's why you can work tirelessly, visualize for hours, follow every technique to the letter, and still feel stuck. Because the energetic core of your pursuit is separation, and separation cannot produce union. Lack cannot produce fulfillment. The key isn't to want it more. The key is to stop needing it. The most powerful shift you can make is from needing to knowing, from craving to claiming, from longing to living. And this doesn't mean you give up on your desires. It means you begin treating them as done, not with arrogance, but with peace. The kind of peace that says, I'm already resonating with the reality where this exists, and I don't need to chase it because I've already become the version of me who has it. That's where magnetism lives, not in the struggle, not in the effort, but in the effortless embodiment of someone who no longer needs to reach, someone who has arrived. And this is where people struggle. They confuse non-chasing with passivity. They think, if I stop wanting, doesn't that mean I'm giving up? But this isn't about apathy. It's about alignment. You stop chasing not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that the version of you who has it would never chase it. They don't need to. They live in the frequency where it already exists. So if you truly want to collapse timelines, the goal isn't to chase faster, it's to become sooner, to feel, think, and act from the posture of someone who no longer desires that thing, because they already live in the experience of it. Not in fantasy, in familiarity. When your desire becomes familiar, so familiar that it no longer feels out of reach, then it starts to become your default frequency, and once it becomes your default, the quantum field locks in. You're no longer broadcasting a temporary vibration. You're embodying a new identity. An identity is the most powerful signal of all. You don't attract what you occasionally visit in meditation. You attract what you consistently feel in your nervous system. So if you're chasing a new life, stop. Because the very act of chasing keeps it just out of reach. But when you step into the calm of arrival, the field has no choice but to respond. And this brings us to the most overlooked power tool in manifestation, emotional rehearsal. Your brain, your body, and the quantum field all respond to repeated feeling states. And here's where the science catches up with the spiritual. When you imagine a future reality and pair it with elevated emotion, like gratitude, love, freedom, or joy, your brain begins to rewire itself. New neural pathways form. Your body begins to produce the same chemicals as if the event had already happened. And over time, you begin to physically embody a future that hasn't yet occurred. But in the quantum world, that future has occurred on another timeline. And your rehearsal is how you signal to the field, this is the version of reality I'm choosing to experience now. This is not pretending. This is not forcing yourself to feel happy when you don't. It's a conscious practice of shifting your dominant emotional tone. If you've spent years anchored in stress, fear, doubt, or frustration, then yes, it will feel strange at first. That's not because it's fake, it's because it's new. Your nervous system has been trained to expect limitation. Emotional rehearsal retrains it to expect freedom, to expect abundance, to expect synchronicity. And when your body expects something, the field aligns with that expectation, not because it's granting you a wish, but because you've tuned to the frequency of that outcome. Practice that enough, and it becomes your new baseline. You no longer visualize as a tool, you live the visualization in your energy. And that's when the quantum field begins to reorganize everything around you. People you haven't met yet begin to think of you. Opportunities you didn't ask for begin to appear. Circumstances adjust without your interference, not because you chased them, because you rehearsed the frequency until the future became familiar, until your inner world stopped waiting for the outer to change. This is where mastery begins. When you stop needing external proof to feel internally aligned. When you wake up in the feeling of success before the results have arrived. When you fall in love with a future that your heart already knows is real, even if your eyes haven't seen it yet, that's not delusion, that's calibration. And when that calibration is steady, sustained, and real, the field doesn't delay. It delivers. The field doesn't ask how long you've wanted something, it only asks, how often do you feel it? How deeply do you embody it? How consistently do you live as if it's already true? Because those feelings, those rehearsals, those quiet moments where you choose the future over the familiar, that's when quantum shifts occur, not from the outside in, from the inside out. You're not convincing the universe, you're reminding it, you're tuning into what has already been created, and you're saying, that's me now. And once your body believes it, the quantum field agrees. You've heard it before. Don't wait for the evidence, become it. But what does that actually mean? It means stop looking to your current reality to confirm whether your manifestation is working. Because here's the hard truth. If you wait for your outer world to validate your inner vision, you'll be waiting forever. The quantum field doesn't respond to evidence. It responds to energy, and energy is generated internally by choice, not by circumstance. So when you stop looking around and start looking within, when you decide to embody the emotional reality of what you desire before it shows up, everything changes. Not because you're tricking the universe, but because you're sending a new signal, one that reality must respond to. The problem is, most people are addicted to their current conditions. They check the bank account, the relationship status, the follower count, and use those metrics as emotional permission slips. They say, "I'll feel confident when things improve. I'll feel worthy when it shows up. I'll trust when I see the signs." But that's not how it works. That's not how the field operates. In quantum terms, cause and effect flips. The feeling becomes the cause, and the effect is the external confirmation. That means you have to go first. You have to feel it before you see it. You have to act from the end, not toward it. You have to breathe as if, walk as if, decide as if, speak as if, live as if, not because you're pretending, but because you're stabilizing a frequency, and that frequency collapses probabilities into form. This is where most people give up, because it requires consistency. It requires an emotional commitment to the unseen. It requires trust in a process that offers no immediate proof. And yet that's the gateway. When you become the evidence, the field begins to respond. People start to treat you differently. New ideas show up out of nowhere. Synchronicities stack in ways your logic can't explain, not because the universe finally approved your request, but because you stopped asking and started being. Your energy stopped begging. Your presence stopped doubting. You moved from seeker to signal. And that's when your life begins to feel orchestrated by something higher, something precise, something deeply intelligent that's always been listening, but only now has something clear to respond to. So, what does it really mean to become the evidence? It means you no longer ask, "Where is it?" You declare, "It's already mine." Not with arrogance, but with calm, with certainty, with an inner stillness that says, "This is who I am now." That declaration is not loud, it's not flashy, it's not forced, it's quiet, grounded, inevitable. And when you reach that place, when you're no longer performing, no longer waiting, no longer searching, your frequency becomes undeniable. You stop looking for alignment because you are alignment, and the field, with perfect obedience, begins to reflect that back. Not all at once, not like magic, but with unmistakable precision. Because resonance is a law, not a reward. But why is this so difficult for most people to grasp? Why is something so simple so misunderstood? Because simplicity doesn't excite the ego. Complexity feels safer. If we have more steps, more rituals, more to-do lists, we feel in control. Simplicity threatens that illusion. It removes the chase. It demands surrender. It asks you to stop striving and start remembering. And that's terrifying to the part of you that's been taught your value comes from effort. But in the quantum realm, effort isn't currency. Frequency is. Alignment is. Presence is. The moment you realize this, the game changes. You stop seeking. You start selecting. You stop hustling, you start harmonizing, you stop convincing life to bring you something, and instead embody the version of yourself who already has it, and the field moves to match. Simplicity is not weakness, it's not laziness, it's mastery. The masters don't do more, they tune better, they collapse distractions, they align their state before they take action. Their lives look effortless because they've made coherence their baseline. They don't try to be magnetic, they are magnetic. And that magnetism doesn't come from doing more, it comes from doing less from lack, less chasing, less needing, less waiting, and more choosing, more feeling, more trusting. They understand that the universe doesn't need to be begged, it needs to be met. And when your signal is clear, when your emotional body vibrates with the energy of certainty, reality doesn't resist, it reorganizes. You might think, but what about my circumstances? What about my trauma? My debt, my loneliness, my failures. And yes, those are real, but they're not the full truth. They are reflections of past vibrations, echoes of old identities. And if you keep responding to those echoes as if they're who you still are, you'll stay trapped in the same loop, repeating the same frequency and wondering why things don't change. But if you can feel something new, even while the old still lingers, if you can tune to the energy of the life you're choosing, even while your current life tries to convince you otherwise, that's when you break the cycle. That's when you collapse the wave. That's when you stop waiting and start being the change you've been waiting for. This isn't just theory, it's how every transformation begins, quietly, internally, with a decision to shift your emotional state, even if nothing around you justifies it yet. A decision to embody your future before it arrives. A decision to stop asking, when will it happen? And instead say, I'm already in motion. It's already unfolding. Because the truth is, the moment you align, things start happening. You may not see them right away, but the field has already shifted. Possibilities are converging. Timelines are adjusting. And all of it begins with your willingness to simplify, to trust, and to let your frequency become the most authentic thing about you. So let this be your reminder. You don't have to chase what's already yours. You don't have to search for signs when you've become the signal. You don't need to see it first to believe it. You need to believe it enough to feel it, and feel it long enough to become it. That's the real shift. That's the doorway. That's the moment everything changes. Not because the world gave you permission, but because you gave yourself the authority to embody the timeline where it's already done. Simplicity isn't the enemy, it's the path. And the moment you let go of the chase, the quantum field stops holding your desire at a distance and starts bending reality to meet the version of you that finally stopped waiting.